A debate over what kinds of books kids should be able to read is tearing a town apart. After proudly announcing police are pairing up with behavioral health clinicians, if a call came in today, Aurora police don't have protocols in place to respond with the right resources. At the center of a booming small town trying to preserve its roots and adapt to a new community is a barbershop. And for all the talk around climate change, CU Boulder professors say we're missing a big point that will stop us from seeing success. So let's talk about it next. Aurora's crisis response team is made up of two critical parts, an officer and a clinician. And then together, they're helping people during a mental health emergency. But that partnership is starting to have its own problems. The department is likely to remain without any clinicians for several more months. It's been that way for a month already. The organization that is providing the clinicians says Aurora is ending its agreement with them at the end of the year. Hiring more clinicians before then is going to be difficult. Here's Mark Zollinger.
When an inmate on work release left a mental health facility in Aurora Sunday evening armed with a knife, no mental health clinicians were working to respond to the call as part of the city's co-responder program. In fact, there are no full-time mental health clinicians on staff right now as part of the crisis response team that may typically respond to a situation like this. Even if there was anyone working, we don't know if a mental health clinician would have responded. Turns out, Aurora 911 doesn't have protocols to determine whether a mental health crisis is occurring and how to handle those calls. That's according to an audit from the city released in June, which found a long list of problems with the crisis response team. The audit states Aurora police lack strong policies governing interactions with individuals with mental health disorders. That's before the program dropped down to 0 clinicians.
I think the most important reason that we do not have clinicians right now is that the city decided to put this contract back out for bid.
Kelly Phillips Henry is the CEO of Aurora Mental Health Center. She says her clinicians were told by officers they work with that they'll likely need to look for new jobs before she even found out that the city was likely contracting with someone else 2 weeks ago. Now she thinks it'll be impossible to hire new clinicians in the next couple of months.
We hold this contract with them until December 31st. Unfortunately, we will not be able to recruit for these positions, right? Knowing that the contract is about to change hands.
The city of Aurora is now moving resources usually devoted to other calls to pick up the demand. The city's mobile response team, a different co-responder program separate from the crisis response team, usually responds to low-intensity calls for service involving mental health to allow police officers to focus on crime. Now, the clinician and paramedic riding in the mobile response team van are being called by police officers more often to respond to different types of mental health emergencies.
I think we're disappointed that this was the outcome. Our community deserves better.
I wanted to see if finding enough clinicians to staff a co-responder program is an Aurora problem or if other departments were facing the same challenges. For the dozen or so departments that got back to me that also have co-responder programs, no others are facing a shortage of clinicians as severe as Aurora.
So is there anyone currently responding to mental health calls for services right now that is a part of that crisis response team?
Yeah, the director of the program, who holds a managerial role, is trained as a clinician and can respond to calls when available. I'm told that's about 1 day a week.
All right. Thanks so much for that, Mark. It is a national monument 80 years in the making. President Biden will be visiting Colorado next week to designate Camp Hale a national monument. That's a source familiar with the trip told 9 News earlier today. The designation has long been a priority for veterans, environmental organizations, and Democratic Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, who is up for re-election. Camp Hale is where the Army trained soldiers in the 10th Mountain Division for mountain warfare in World War II. Advocates want a national monument declaration to cover Camp Hale National Historic Site and the 10-mile range and 28 miles of the Continental Divide Trail. So we don't know at this point the scope of the president's announcements yet, but a source familiar with the president's trip is telling us that 10-mile range could be included as a part of that monument. Camp Hale would be President Biden's first national monument designation. A group of lawmakers, including Senator Bennet, have encouraged him to make that designation himself after a bill had stalled in Congress. A Nebraska man that was convicted of threats against Colorado's top election official will be spending the next 18 months behind bars. This is one of the first cases handled by a federal task force devoted to protecting election workers across the country. Earlier this year, Travis Ford had pleaded guilty to sending threats to Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold on Instagram. Griswold has faced several lawsuits and threats over her insistence that the 2020 election was secure. Concerns for her safety prompted her office to hire private security, and the director of the Colorado County Clerks Association says security is top priority this year as election workers are facing threats in the lead up to November's elections, and that means officers are installing things like new cameras as well as bulletproof glass. TLDR, too long, didn't read. When you write too much on social media, you lose people's attention and they don't actually read what you've posted. Election ballots don't always have the choice but to be too long. And whether it's for that reason or procrastinating, voters often wait until the last few days to turn in their ballots. That also means a longer wait for results. So politics guy Marshall Zollinger is explaining what you can do to get more definitive results before you go to bed on election night.
Ahead of the November 8th election, all counties are testing their ballot equipment.
The high-pro scanners that you see in our office there, the ones that are about as tall as I am, they can do up to 20,000 cards in an hour.
Because of state and city ballot issues, judges and candidates, Denver's ballot is 3 cards, front and back. So 20,000 cards an hour equals about 6,600 voters, which is a problem if you're expecting faster results on election night, especially when the majority of voters turn in their mail ballots at or near election night.
When people see the numbers and they're like, why is it taking you all so long to count 330,000, 340,000 ballots? They're not multiplying by 3.
In June's primary in Denver, nearly half of all votes were turned in the Monday before the election and the day of. Arapahoe County saw the same last 2-day spike also in June's primary.
If you want the most possible results, the most possible votes counted by the time you go to bed on election night, then the earlier you turn in your mail ballot, that makes it better for everybody else.
Planning to get your ballot in early, besides helping everyone get faster results, can also prepare you to digest ballot issues that take up the entire page, like this one in Adams County. Voters who live in School District 27J are being asked for more money in a very detailed way.
They provided us with ballot content for this mill levy override that is very, very specific, down to the penny of what they intend to spend and how they intend to spend it.
In Adams County in June, you guessed it, a little more than half of all primary voters turned in their ballots the final 2 days.
We can typically double the amount of ballots that we receive on Friday to estimate what we'll get on Monday, double that again to estimate what we'll get on Tuesday, and so that's what we in our world call the hockey stick.
A hockey stick, huh? Well, here's what that means. This is when ballots go out, October 17th. Most counties do not see a high number of ballots come in. Then as we get closer to Election Day, the Friday before, Monday, Tuesday, it spikes like a hockey stick. But I will warn you, here is when our last debate is. So maybe just wait till here and then make it spike up a little earlier than normal.
Thank you. I wouldn't have gotten it without the hockey stick. It all makes sense now. Okay, just because people turn in ballots earlier, it's not like information is given away or anything like that.
Right. Just because you turn in your ballot right away, nobody knows how you voted. They've scanned it. It's just sitting there in the computer waiting for someone to hit tabulate, which doesn't happen until 7 p.m. on election night. But everyone who voted early, as soon as they hit tabulate, boom, we know tens of thousands of results. So if more people would vote earlier, we'd have a better feel for the results on election. We still don't know the final results for a week or two later because we've talked about it in the past, there's multiple things that happen immediately afterwards. But vote earlier, we'll have a better feel on election night.
Is that from Steve Stager's desk? Is that where that came from?
This is from the sports department. The 2008 All-Star Game for the CHL.
Oh my gosh. All right. Thank you, Marshall. Appreciate it. Well, the issue of book banning right now is across the country, but it's also dividing communities here in Colorado. The American Library Association says efforts to remove books from public or school libraries are at the highest level in decades. As first reported by the Colorado Sentinel, Cherry Creek Schools removed a book from their libraries just this week that was following a parent complaint. The book is called Let's Talk About It, A Teen's Guide to Sex, Relationships, and Being a Human. A district spokesperson with the school district says that they removed that book after after review concluded the book was containing age-inappropriate content and promoted illegal activity like underage sexting. 2 other books dealing with LGBTQ issues were also under review but not removed from school libraries. Meanwhile, in Larimer County, there are similar complaints were launched against a list of books available in public libraries in the town of Wellington. A group of parents wanted the library to ban or restrict a list of books that they believed was inappropriate. That list included books marketed to adults like 50 Shades of Grey. People on both sides of the issue are making some passionate pleas to the Board of Trustees, and Wellington's mayor says that this argument was tearing the town apart.
We have the opportunity right now to stop this war in this case by proactively stating the intent and support for our community and our library.
This isn't about left or right. This is about parenting. I don't want anybody in this room to tell me how to parent my child, and I'm not going to tell you how to parent yours.
Our library staff has no ill intent to hand out anything to children that may be inappropriate.
So the Board of Trustees passed a resolution to prevent future board members from banning or censoring books at the town's public libraries. And town officials say that debate has calmed down for now.
A CU Boulder professor says our talks about climate change solutions tend to leave out some critical.
We've been hearing a lot about big pledges from states and companies and individual people to battle climate change. But CU Boulder professors say that we're missing a very important part of the conversation. And without it, we're not going to be able to make those big changes that are needed to fight global warming.
Who has benefited from greenhouse gas emissions that have led to climate change? Who is suffering the impacts of the climate change that we see disproportionately? And then who has the resources to adapt?
We are talking about climate justice. So one of the examples CU Boulder professors are talking about is a responsibility for developed countries to help developing countries with resources to adapt. There was this huge 2020 deadline already missed. People most affected by climate change often contribute the least to the problem, and that trust between government and minority communities need to be built up more.
We can also see this very locally for example, in Native American communities, where, again, they have done very little to contribute to the problem of global warming or global heating, but they're also the ones who are suffering the most. A third of global emissions total, altogether have been emitted by 20 companies, right? And if those are the same groups that are offering purported solutions, often the solutions that they offer will end up having other kinds of negative effects.
There's so much to untangle here. So think about all the times we've talked about climate change. Now think about all of the plastic we still see everywhere. So some things we need, right? Like in IV tubes, others, maybe there's an alternative to consider. The World Economic Forum is projecting that plastic amounts will more than triple by 2050. And the professor said talks around climate justice are just now creeping into conversations with national leaders.
It's a big night across downtown Denver as we have Broncos facing off with the Colts as well as the Great American Beer Festival. And of course, well, it looks like a little smoke out there at the stadium, but the weather conditions have been fantastic today. We saw temperatures in the lower 70s, cooling things off just a bit, but upper 60s, not bad for October, right? We're at 64 in Boulder with some 50s in Estes Park as well as Netherland. A couple of isolated showers out there primarily around the far central mountains. Otherwise, we're keeping a close eye on this cold front. It'll take a line drive through Denver late tonight into early tomorrow morning and drop off our temperatures dramatically tomorrow. Yes, it will finally feel more like fall with those highs only in the 50s. As we go throughout the evening, you'll notice that cloud deck really beginning to push in. A little bit of patchy fog early tomorrow morning. This is 8 a.m. up and down the I-25 corridor. Maybe by the afternoon, we'll be able to sneak in a little bit of sunshine and possibly a few isolated showers tracking across the eastern plains. But these highs in the 40s and 50s for many of folks here in eastern Colorado. We continue to warm up as we look ahead toward the weekend with highs back to the mid-70s early next week.
The population is booming in a once small town in northern Colorado.
They want to find their crew, their tribe, their group of people that they like to hang out with.
But there is always an open chair ready to welcome them in. We'll take you there next.
Wellington, Colorado was incorporated in 1903. The northern Colorado town stayed pretty small for more than a century. But now, like so much of the state, it's going through a population boom. Our Byron Wendland is showing us that at the center of all of this is a barbershop.
On sleepy streets in small towns like Wellington, there's a place that's almost always buzzing.
No pressure here.
Mike Chambriello,
I've been cutting Nick for a long time.
Co-owns Hager's Barbershop.
Yeah, it just kind of brings everybody together.
With Brianna Hunter.
I think it was like 10,000 or 9,000 population when I first got here.
They're trying to keep history alive.
And now it's at like around 15, I want to say.
In their once tiny boom town.
There are so many people, like, new transplants coming in here. They want to find their crew, their tribe, their group of people that they like to hang out with.
Just opened in July, Hager's has become the spot to get a cut.
I like Mike as a person, for sure.
And bridge the gap.
I've been in the shop when there was a retired military vet in here getting his high and tight. And I'm sitting here, getting kind of a faux hawk.
Modern techniques.
I'm giving him a taper fade.
Mixed with 100 years of tradition.
When they would come in and get their saddle work done or their strap work done, they would come and tie their horses here and walk on in to get all their work done.
Horses have been replaced with horsepower. Ranches are becoming ranch-style homes. But there's a chance to connect with every new shave.
What do you do this week besides the gala? Anything?
This building has decades of stories to tell. And it's becoming home.
All set, man.
For a community starting to write its next chapter.
Thank you, as always.
Thank you.
Brian Wendland.
Appreciate it.
9 News.
Thanks to Brian for that story. We have your feedback next. So we got a text message. Send Anusha, Marshall, or Kyle to help Aurora with their mental health calls. 3 do-nothings with only the ability to complain. They're looking for professionals with expertise, not the 3 of us. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time.